Hello there, this is the gunman from Birtley last night. My name is Raoul Moat.
Okay.
But the thing is, I've lost everything through you. So you don't want me to kill yourself, but I'm going to give you a chance, because I am hunting for officers now.
In July 2010, the UK was sent into a national frenzy following a 7-day manhunt for one of Britain's most notorious criminals. A man who would not only hunt down 3 innocent victims, but declare war on the UK's entire police force. Violence, tension, fear and intrigue gripped the nation as we watched one of the most bizarre yet real incidents take place in the north of England. This is the story of Raoul Moat.
So before we get into the episode, I just want to say that this is a true story of one of Britain's most violent criminals. And what we always do in these episodes is try and cover this as best we can. And remember, we always do so only using publicly available information and stuff that we actually have access to. And what I will say is that there are parts of this story where we cover mental health issues, and if you're struggling with anything like this, we will leave some resources in the description for you to be able to have access to. Just remember one thing: you are never alone, and there will be plenty of people around that will be there to support you if you are struggling with anything like this. Now let's get into the story, and let me tell you more about the night of Saturday the 3rd of July 2010. So the place we're in is called Birtley in Gateshead in the north of England. Have you ever been there?
You know I've been to the north of England. I love the north
Have
of
you been
England.
to Gateshead though?
Yeah, I think I have.
Famously, Gateshead play in the same colours as Newcastle. They're kind of like a rip-off football team in the National League.
Timu version.
Yeah, there you go. And basically, we start this story off as 2 normal people enjoying a very happy, very normal evening. They're out there having a few drinks and they're just relaxing. Those 2 people are called Samantha Stobbart and Chris Brown. Samantha was just 22 years old at the time and she was a mother of 3. And Chris Brown was a 29-year-old karate instructor. These 2 had just started a fledgling romantic relationship. What they didn't know, though, was that there was a man lurking outside that property, and in the cover of darkness, he was listening to everything that they'd said and everything that was going on at the time.
And not only listening, getting very, very agitated, very, very riled up, to the point where this man was about to commit a horrific crime.
You were telling me earlier on, right, that he wasn't outside the right window.
No, he was actually underneath the wrong window. This man was underneath the window of the property that Samantha Stobbart lived in, and he could feel that he could hear them. He actually thought that they were speaking about him and making fun of him and stuff like that. Actually, what you could hear was the noise coming from next door, which was Chris Brown and Samantha Stobbart with a couple of neighbours. But it was only when they left the property that he realised he was under the wrong window. They were next door at the neighbour's house.
Yeah. So now it's 2:40 a.m. The 2 of them, Samantha and Chris, leave the front door, right? Yeah. They walk out. And what do you know what they were even doing? Because it's 2:40 in the morning. I didn't even actually know what they were going outside for. Were they leaving the neighbour's house?
They were coming home.
That was it.
They were coming home. And from the pictures I've seen of the property, you would have had to have walked down, opened the gate, and then literally done a 190 and walked back in and walked back up your own driveway. But when the couple started to walk up Samantha's driveway, Samantha noticed that there was some sort of rustling in the bushes, and this is when Raoul Moat appears. He shoots Chris from point blank range. But not only that, it's not finished there. Samantha rushes back inside to the neighbour's house. They call the police, and in the meantime, they're watching out of the front window, aren't they, of the events that are unfolding.
And what we should say is that this is a summer's day. It's in July. It's a warm evening. They've opened the window up to allow some breeze to come through and to cool off the property. And obviously, therefore, the window is open. Raoul sees Samantha in the front room, and unfortunately he lets off another shot and it hits Samantha. She's then injured in the arm and in the stomach, and really that's the sort of I would say the end of the chaotic scene, but really it's the start of the story.
It's the start of the story, and I think what we need to do here is actually give some context as to who this man is and why this situation unfolded. So let's start off with Raoul Moat himself. And what I want to do is go all the way back to the start. 17th of June 1973, a young boy named Raoul Moat is born to his mother Josephine Healy. Raoul had an older brother called Angus, but Raoul's father had actually left his mum before ever finding out that she was pregnant, and she actually decided that it would be best not to ever tell Raoul's father about Raoul's existence. And Raoul's father, Peter Blake, did eventually discover that Josephine had given birth to their son, and he immediately tried to contact, but Raoul's mother was very stubborn and made the decision to exclude Peter from his son's life.
Didn't she lie to her son and basically say that he never had a dad? In fact, wasn't there no name on the birth certificate that he had?
Correct, yeah. There was no name of a father on the birth certificate, and I'm sure she said things along the lines of you never had a dad, but what she did do is she manipulated Raoul into believing that his father didn't want anything to do with him and his father didn't want to play a role in his life, and that wasn't actually the case.
But I think this affected Raoul quite a lot, didn't it? Because wasn't he making up stuff at school? That saying that he actually had a dad and saying who he was even?
Yeah, he had a dad. He was a soldier, and that was why he was away and things like that. But I think a lot of the other pupils started to realise very quickly that this wasn't the case. And something that also probably became quite apparent very quickly was Raoul Moat's home life. Like so many of the criminals and of the characters involved in these cases that we see, was very, very traumatic from day one. His mother had bipolar and she would regularly have schizophrenic episodes. There's a tale of her burning Raoul and his brother's toys in front of them. And at a very young age, I can tell you, having a child myself, that is something that would be very, very traumatic for a child. And there was a lot more than just this too that went on inside the house.
Yeah, this is just one of those things that we hear a story of, and we've been told this in terms of the Raoul Moat backstory. But obviously there are so many other occasions which will be completely private to Raoul and the family that we might not have ever have known. And I think what we've got to be cognizant of is we're telling a story of a man who is clearly, troubled and is going through quite a lot. And what you'll see in these formative years is why that becomes apparent in his later life. And there are so many other instances of this, aren't there?
There are, and obviously as well, you had the fact that with the mental condition of Josephine, Raoul's mum, the kids actually went on to live with their grandmother while Josephine got herself better. And
they were still living relatively close, weren't they? They weren't that far away. I think it was just a couple of streets away, weren't they? They could pop in and see each other. In fact, the mum actually spent a lot of time in their lives, but it wasn't like she was looking after them constantly.
To be honest, from the reports I've read and the research I've done into the case, Raoul and his brother probably had a bit of a better home life when living with their nan, because there was just a lot more stability within that household. However, once Raoul gets into his teenage years, he does start to suffer with his own mental health, and it's obviously a continuation of childhood trauma. And instead of seeking help through, I don't know, some form of, medical advice or professional help, what Raoul actually decides to do is train his way through his trauma. And listen, that's not a bad idea at all. That's probably one of the first bits of advice that I would give someone that is struggling mentally is, make sure that you're eating right, you're not putting anything bad in your body, and that you're training. So from one point of view, that was actually very, very good. But the problem was Raoul wasn't training as a runner, as a swimmer, as a cyclist. Raoul was into bodybuilding. Yep. And what came with bodybuilding was a gravitation towards taking what we know as juice.
This is the thing, right? We expect exercise to be that sort of release, but what it was a bit of an obsession. And I think this is actually a bit of a continuing theme of Raoul Moat's life, is that he would become fixated on certain things. And I think the gym was both his release, but also his addiction, wasn't it? Yeah. And that's why, when this is a tale as old as time, isn't it? When people get on the juice, it often exacerbates the worst part of people sometimes, like the emotional element of you. If you're an angry person, you often become angrier on the juice.
Yeah, 100%. Like, he wasn't just piling muscle upon his frame. He was piling a lot of roid rage, a lot of trauma, a lot of anxiety and emotion that he didn't know how to control onto his own mindset, which ultimately just led him down quite a dark path.
Yeah. And during this time, he had various different jobs, didn't he? He couldn't really hold down one or the other. I heard he worked, in a shop. I heard he worked as an engineer. He worked as a tree surgeon. And finally, I mean, the job that he was probably best at was the bouncer job, wasn't it?
I mean, he was 6'3" and 250 pounds, and didn't mind a fight by all accounts. So yeah, he was a bouncer on a lot of popular nightclub and bar doors in Newcastle city centre, apparently. So not only was he in a job at this point during life where, you know, he enjoyed it. He felt like he had authority over people, which was something that he had lacked as a child and obviously relished as an adult, in my opinion. Not only that, he was quite a recognisable guy around town. I don't think you can be a 6'3" blonde bouncer without being recognisable, or in the shape that Raoul Moat was. So he was well known throughout the sort of city centre in Newcastle, wasn't he?
Yeah, he absolutely was. And this is the thing, like, the power element that you mentioned is a key part of this. He enjoyed the sort of the authority. He enjoyed throwing his weight around. And this was something that actually gave him fulfillment in his life in a way that he hadn't previously had. But we're talking about the sort of the positive things that are going on in his life, where he had a very negative childhood. There was some dark side to his personality that were actually coming through at this point as well, weren't there?
Well, you just mentioned the power element, and the reason of, you know, enjoying the gig of being a bouncer is you do have that power and the decision making over, you know, a nightclub, a bar, something like that, who comes in, who comes out, and that controlling, sort of coercive, wanting the power element to his personality came out most prominently whenever he was involved in any kind of romantic relationship, didn't it?
Joey, I want to tell you about something that's changed my life.
Me?
No, it's not you. It's not you. It's this little thing. It's called the Plord AI Note, and it slips right onto the back of your phone. Ooh. Look how smooth that looks right there.
That was smooth. That was smooth. That's the sort of move I'd be pulling out in front of the ladies in the pub.
Yeah, you've done that before. So yeah, this is the Plord Note, a sleek pro-level AI note taker that literally records and creates notes for you. So whether you're listening, say, to a long-form podcast and you want to remember what we talked about, and I've just actually recorded that entire podcast, so I will show the notes on screen right now that we got from that. Or, for example, you might be sat in a meeting at an office job and you're desperately trying to remember what the to-do actions were from that meeting. This is the thing for you. Plord captures everything you want at the touch of a button, and afterwards it provides a smart, structured summary with all of the key takeaways, and even identifies different speakers just from their voice. You can also choose from different templates. So say, for example, you wanted like a meeting summary, you've got one for that. If you wanted like a to-do list, you've got that as well. Or you can go for something like a mind map, which is also very useful if, for example, you're in like a lecture or something like that. And whether you're a YouTuber or a salesperson, a journalist, an executive, a teacher, whatever you are, you're going to find some use out of this. And don't worry about data privacy either, because Plord keeps your data safe with end-to-end encryption, which meets top global privacy standards like GDPR. And they've also got this thing called Ask AI, which basically allows you across your entire nose to ask it questions. So like, for example, what did we talk about in this podcast? When did we mention the Raoul Moat case? And it will actually bring that up and answer it directly. So it's super seamless to use. And it's super slim and only weighs 30 grams in weight. And the good news is that battery life isn't an issue either. It's got 60 days of standby time, and you can record continuously for over 30 hours. And I don't know a podcast, even one of ours, that is going to last that long. And over 1 million people are using Plord every day. So you'll be in good company when you pick one up for yourself. Remember, if you hit the link in the description, you will get £10 off by using our code JAJ10 at checkout. And that, as I say, will give you a massive discount. So save yourself hours of time and support the channel by supporting Plord. Now let's get back into the video. So yeah, he met this young lady called Caroline. They started a romantic relationship together. She was actually a mother of two already before Raoul had met her. And basically they seemed to have a really happy life together. That was until Caroline actually fell pregnant. And basically what Raoul had said to her is, if you don't get rid of this baby, I'm going to make sure you do.
Yeah, exactly that. Take matters into his own hands is what he was threatening to do. And thank God for Caroline. She got herself out of that situation quite quickly, was actually able to put out a restraining order on Raoul Moat, which meant that he wasn't able to have contact. And she went through with the pregnancy. She gave birth to a daughter. And as far as I know, Raoul Moat never met that daughter.
Luckily so, I would say, for the sake of that daughter.
Yeah, well, you say that, but not everyone was as lucky, because the most sort of serious, I would say, or at least the longest out of all of Raoul Moat's relationships, was actually with a woman named Marissa, and she too had a daughter with Raoul. However, much like Raoul's previous relationship, Marissa really had things tough. She suffered a lot of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of Moat, and by the mid-2000s, Marissa had left Raoul, yet he would not take no for an answer, and somehow managed to get custody of the 2 children, despite reports that only one of them was even his.
So what I think we can clearly say is that Raoul Moat was a manipulator. And he did that with his romantic partners, but he also did that with his children as well.
100%. And this is one of the things that is just so sick, to try and influence a child's mind to tell lies. There were multiple times when Raoul Moat had actually reported his ex-partner to the police for various incidents that were basically fabricated, didn't happen a lot of the time, or at least didn't happen in the way that he had told the police that they did. But he manipulated his children into going along, basically, you know, coercing with him and telling the stories. But the problem was, the police force were very quick to work out that these children's stories weren't watertight in the slightest. They were Rizzler paper thin, if anything. And that actually led them to bring Marissa into the police station. And this is the first time that Marissa's really had her chance to have a say on the case. And upon hearing Marissa's backlog of evidence and allegations against Raoul Moat, she actually gets custody back of her 2 children, doesn't she?
She absolutely does, and rightly so, by the way. I mean, one of the instances that you were talking about, by the way, is they get into a police station. He starts questioning the police separately to Raoul, the young girl, his daughter, and the daughter just goes, "My daddy told me everything to say in the car." And it's just quite obvious that it was all going to fall apart. So yes, Marissa gets custody, and really Raoul has then got to try and move on to the next phase of his life. Now, what you'd expect is that he'd find a nice partner, you know, try and move on, try and start a new phase. The new partner, Joey, was probably not the best partner to go with, it, was it?
She wasn't the best partner for Moat, and more importantly, she wasn't the best partner for someone of Raoul Moat's age, because this new partner was Samantha Stobbart, who had recently just turned 16. Now, Raoul had met her on the doors of the nightclubs. I don't know whether she had a fake ID, an older sibling's passport she might have used, or Raoul might have just let her in because he felt that that was a way that he could charm her by letting her in to these nightclubs. But their relationship developed and escalated very, very quickly, and she kind of fell head over heels for Raoul Moat.
And yeah, this wasn't just discussing the fact that he's actually got with Samantha in the first place, bearing in mind the age difference, but they also then had a child fairly quickly after this, and the child's name was called Chantel. Chantel also had a very tough upbringing and a very tough life. By all accounts, it was a very troubled household at the time, and she actually herself had to deal with abuse. I mean, some stories I've heard are just absolutely ridiculous, like her having to wait outside in the cold, like in the middle of winter in Newcastle. You can imagine how freezing cold it would be. There are other stories which, quite frankly, I don't really want to go into.
Well, there's just a couple that aren't too, you know, I won't go into anything too bad, but also, I mean, I say too bad, these are all fucking horrific to treat a child like this. But there was a consistent theme of an activity that used to make her do, which was cutting the grass, right? Cut the grass. Many parents get their kids to cut the grass, give them a bit of pocket money. I don't believe there was any pocket money involved, and there wasn't a lawnmower involved. He used to make his daughter cut the grass with a handheld pair of scissors. right? Not designed for cutting grass. And when his daughter actually came forward and spoke about her upbringing under Raoul Moat, she said that it would be to the point where her fingers would be blistered and bleeding and bruised and things like this. And the probably worst part that I've heard of this that I'm willing to speak about on camera is the incident with the family pet. This also wasn't the first time that this had been reported, but basically Raoul Moat had a history of animal abuse. As much as he'd abused, his family and all of the women that he was in his life, he also had a record of mistreating animals. The incident that Joey's talking about in particular here is an incident which effectively he beat up a dog with a baseball bat, and this wasn't the first time. He didn't beat up the dog. He killed the dog with a baseball bat. Yeah,
absolutely awful.
A baseball bat that was apparently covered in glass.
Wow.
So
it's just so wrong.
Yeah,
it's just so wrong.
Yeah, it's a really, really just awful experience. And I understand that there's a link between people that have suffered childhood trauma and then passing that down. At the same time, there's that part of me that says, well, if you have suffered from it, surely you must know how much it's affected you and never want that for your own child. But how often do I say to you, I will never let my son box. My son will never box because I've boxed, and I don't want that for my child because, you're getting hit all the time and whatnot. So normal thinking parents will often think of their life experiences and do everything they can to make sure that their child does not have that same experience. Raoul Moat was not that sort of parent. And Samantha Stobbart, obviously growing in age by this point, had started to realise this is not the dream she was sold, and this is not the man she believed that she was committing herself to. So secretively, she started to save up money, and once she finally got enough, she chose to take her daughter and to leave Raoul Moat. Now, on form, you'd expect Raoul Moat to go chasing after this ex-partner of his and his daughter, but he wasn't afforded that luxury, because in the short period of time between Samantha Stobbart and their daughter leaving, Raoul Moat was actually apprehended, arrested, and sent to prison for assaulting a 9-year-old family member.
So this wasn't his daughter, and by all means, we don't necessarily know exactly who it was, do we? We don't know the answer to this question.
We don't. We know it was described as a family member. The name of the person has never been put forward. And no, I don't think it was his daughter.
I don't think it was either. So basically, he gets sentenced and sent to prison on the 25th of February 2010. And he ends up going to Durham prison. Now, you can imagine this guy's already a resentful personality. Like, he already hates the sort of authority figures that are controlling him, or he seems to be controlling him. And so his time in prison is a very negative moment in his life. All of the pain and anger grows. His resentment for law enforcement grows. And he believes that the system is set up against him. He sees that everyone else is out to get him, and all of his past indiscretions are none of his fault. And really, he doesn't see himself as ever doing anything wrong. In fact, there are phone calls where he describes himself as being on the straight and narrow, having a normal career. He was basically operating as a tree surgeon at this time. So he felt like he was a completely normal bloke working a normal life, and he saw the police as terrorizing him. He saw the police as getting involved in his life unnecessarily, and he saw that as completely unfair.
Yeah, and these claims have been backed up by people around him, people that wouldn't have a motivation or a sort of narrative to create around Raoul Moat. People that wouldn't like Raoul Moat by this point have confirmed, that he did used to get pulled over consistently by police, despite not having a real history of a reason to be pulled over, i.e., substances in the car or something like that. So there was a level of attention paid to Raoul Moat by the police, according to Raoul Moat's family, that he felt was a bit too much.
Well, would you find the fact that he was arrested 12 times and charged 7 times a fair reason why the police would want to be putting some focus on him?
I'd find that a very fair fair fact why they would want to. I'm trying to put myself in the mind of this man and trying to give you my interpretation as to why he was feeling like he was being harassed.
Yep.
Because what I'm saying there is he was getting pulled over by police. This isn't something we're disputing. He was getting pulled over a lot by police.
I would say rightly so.
Rightly so. In the mind of most psychopaths and stuff like this, we were talking about the fact that it's never Raoul that has done wrong. It's always someone else, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So the fact that that is the case in his mind, I can see why he feels that he was being harassed by the police at the time.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Within this episode, we're not ever justifying the actions of Raoul Moat, but rather what we're trying to understand is his mindset at the time. And so this is why I'm glad you asked that question, because, again, we're trying to understand why he feels a certain way. And I'm trying to paint a picture of why he was getting in this sort of phase of his own life at this moment. And again, you can just feel the anger bubbling while he's in prison. Now, while he was in prison, Moat finds out that his ex-partner, Samantha, was dating another man.
Yeah.
Now, that man's name was Chris Brown. Now, the question I've got to you is, you might be wondering, and everyone watching might be wondering, how did he find this piece of information out? Do you know the answer to that question?
I think Samantha Stobbart went to prison and told him on a visit or sent him a letter, maybe?
That's not true.
No? How?
No. Do you not know the answer to this?
I don't know the answer
So
to this.
the answer was he had a friend on the outside that he'd asked to take a look at Samantha. That friend was called Carl Ness, a man that we'll find out a little bit more on the outside of this story and later on in the episode. But the fact that Raoul had intentionally asked for some espionage to go on and for him to watch Samantha indicates just how bad this psychopathy had got. It had gone to a whole nother level. It was scary.
Now, what Carl Ness wouldn't have known at the time was too many personal details about Chris Brown. How Chris Brown and Samantha actually met is...
it's actually a beautiful story, this is.
He was handing out leaflets, wasn't he?
Yeah, so basically, Chris Brown was a karate instructor. He'd started a business. He actually wasn't even from Newcastle. He actually went up to Newcastle to start a new life, effectively, and was a karate instructor. And much like you do, I mean, I remember this all the time. In fact, this is why I went to a karate class when I was about 10 years old. Guy knocks on the door, you get a leaflet, and you go, oh, actually, karate would be quite useful to know. My kid would find some use out of getting some self-defense. With you, it was boxing. With me, it was judo and karate. Boxing a lot more useful, but I won't go too much into that. So yeah, basically, Chris meets Samantha on the door, and by all accounts, fall in love. Chris was slightly older than Samantha. I think it was about 7 years older. But again,
it's a lot better than 15, 16 years older, in my opinion. And remember, this is a Samantha that is now, I think 22 or something like that.
Exactly that.
7 years older when you're 22. It's just not the same as when you're younger. Once everyone gets past 21 years old, I just kind of feel like we're all the same age, really.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that Chris Brown is very happy to live with Samantha having 3 kids, actually I think is a testament to his character. It seems like he's a really nice guy, and he's willing to forgo the current situation and just falls in love with the lady, which I think is a beautiful moment. Now, the problem is that Raoul obviously knows about this, and he starts calling Samantha over and over again, to a point in which she was so terrified to answer that eventually she actually did answer. And I have to say, this is a start of a very bad element of the story now. Obviously, Samantha is terrified. She's doing everything she possibly can to kind of scare Raoul Moat away and to try and prevent him from causing her harm or the kids harm. And so what she says, which is, as I say, one of the biggest mistakes that she will ever do, is that she says to him that Chris is a police officer.
However, I do want to just quickly jump in here. And again, everything's just from recollection, from what we've been able to find, and from people involved in the case that have spoken publicly on the case. But there are different stories about how the Chris is the police officer narrative came about, with quite a few people actually saying that it was Chris's idea to tell Raoul that he was a police officer, and other people arguing that it was Samantha's. What we know for a fact is that both of them knew that Chris was a police officer in the eyes of Raoul Moat. Both of them knew this. It wasn't that Samantha Stobbart had gone to Raoul and said, my boyfriend's a police officer, and Chris knew nothing about this. He did know that they were doing this, and they thought it was the best course of action.
They concocted the plan, and they thought that this plan would be the safest way to make sure that Raoul Moat wouldn't harass them. And it was the complete opposite of that. Like, basically, this is bubbling away. The anger is getting more and more. You can physically imagine the boiling point that Raoul Moat gets to at this point. And the saddest part of this story is that Raoul Moat wasn't quiet about this. He wasn't quiet about his plan. He wasn't quiet about what he wanted to do next. So much so that someone in the prison, or two people actually in the prison, both an inmate and a cleaner, actually reported this to relevant authorities within the prison and basically said, I've heard this and there's a relevant threat on someone on the outside and you guys need to do something about it. Do you know what actually happened at that point? What the prison actually did?
More or less released him straight away.
They did. He was released from prison on the 1st of July 2010. But on the 2nd of July, Durham Prison sent an email. Obviously, that's what you do in a really urgent, life-threatening, potentially situation.
Who doesn't check their emails consistently?
Exactly. To Northumbria Police, where they basically said that there was an intent, a real credible threat on the life of his partner, Samantha, and her partner, Chris Brown. So again, what you immediately do expect is that the police go straight into action. She's put in witness protection or protection in general to safeguard her. That's not what happened.
That's not what happened. Obviously, Raoul is released on the 1st of July.
Yep.
And straight away, he starts letting his feelings known about the circumstances and the situations that's going on in his life, doesn't he?
He does. Basically, he writes a Facebook status, which again, anyone that follows him on Facebook will have seen this, and it's very concerning. It just says, got out of jail, I've lost everything, my business, my property, and to top it all off, my lass of 6 years has gone off with the copper that sent me down. I'm not 21, I can't rebuild my life. Watch and see what happens next. I mean, he's basically saying what he's going to do next, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but he's also lying.
Yes.
The copper that sent you down, like, he didn't send you down. You didn't even know he was a copper until Samantha's told you it.
And he isn't even a copper.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's mental. Shortly after writing that Facebook status, he rings up Carl Ness, his friend that's been keeping an eye on Samantha. Samantha had actually moved, I believe, while Raoul was in prison, but with having eyeballs kept on her, he was very easily able to locate her. Now, Carl Ness picks Raoul Moat up on the evening of the 2nd, and they drive to the address that Samantha Stobbart is living at. By this point, we've gone past midnight. We're into the early hours of the 3rd of July, and Raoul Moat has positioned himself crouched down. By the way, this is a 6'3", 250-pound man crouched down underneath a windowsill of a front living room. He's bubbling in anger. He can hear that people inside talking about him in his words and what he's expressed. Whether they were or whether they're not, I don't know how much credibility that has. Maybe he could hear it. Maybe he could hear it. Yeah. But, you know, in the mind of people that are this warped, sometimes they can hear stuff, doesn't mean it's actually being said. But regardless, around 20 to 3 a.m, the couple actually leave the residence of the next door neighbours. They walk down the garden path, and it's at that point Samantha hears rustling in the bushes. Chris walks forward to see what it is, and Raoul emerges with a shotgun and shoots Chris directly in the chest at point blank range. Samantha runs back in to the neighbour's house. They lock the door and straight away they call the police, but they can still see outside where Chris is. Raoul Moat then walks over, knowing that he's already potentially fired a critical wound into Chris Brown, and he shoots him in the head at point blank range. And as horrific as that must be to have anyone had seen that, not only did he do that, he then turns his attention back to Samantha, who's inside her next door neighbour's house, and through the window he shoots her. And this bullet, I think, goes through her arm and into her abdomen.
It's a shotgun bullet, so it's like, it's pellets. So it's like, and they talked about this. There's pellets going into her body. So yeah, it's gone through the arm, into her stomach, and yeah, into other bodily organs, which, I mean, significant injuries you're talking about from shotgun shells. Really bad.
Now, he actually runs off after this happens. He flees on foot. His plan was to get back into Carl Ness's van that he had been drove over there in. However, when he gets to the corner where Carl Ness had agreed to wait for him, Carl Ness's van's not there.
It wasn't there. So people have said at this point, did Carl Ness know what he was about to do, what Moat was about to do?
Well, with the information we have to this point, right now, I would suggest maybe not. Maybe he might not have known. Because if his van's not there, then it would lead you to believe that maybe he's heard a gunshot and fled the scene.
I mean, if you hear a gunshot, you can understand why someone would want to drive away, especially if it's the person that you think is involved in the gunshot. Because you're thinking, could I be involved in this? Am I now an accomplice? You're scared.
Yeah. And at this moment in time, I don't think that Carl Ness is a nailed-on accomplice of Raoul Moat's.
Yeah, I think we'll discuss that a little bit later on in terms of how close he was to the actual crime. But what we know for sure is that from this point on, there is like a nationwide manhunt. Probably one of the biggest manhunts in British history.
100% is the biggest manhunt in British history, I believe. And despite us knowing who we're looking for, feeling like we know the motive, the only thing we don't know is where is Raoul Moat.
So yeah, this is where the search really kicks off. So bear in mind the shooting of Samantha and Chris, that was on 2 a.m. on Saturday the 3rd of July. The next point in the search, where it really now kicks off, is 2 p.m. that same day. That is where Raoul Moat goes to a friend's house, and we use the term friend very loosely. This was like an old school friend that he didn't really know that well, but he knocks on this guy's door, and this guy is called Andy McAllister, isn't he?
Yeah, and basically Raoul goes around there to have a bit of a vent. He tells Andy what he has done the evening before, and Andy immediately says to him, mate, you've got to go and hand yourself in. Like, you need to hand yourself in. You can make this right. But Raoul doesn't take him up on that advice, does he?
He does give him something, though. He gives him a 40-page letter, which effectively, I wouldn't necessarily say is a confession, but it's definitely a sort of an explanation of his intent. You can tell again the state of mind that Raoul Moat is in right now. He's manic. He's written a 40-page letter to explain his actions. And again, this is now where the sort of the series of events really starts to unfold.
Well, straight away, as soon as Raoul leaves the house, Andy calls the police and says, I've just had Raoul Moat here, and straight away, the police spring into action. And this is really where the manhunt intensifies, I would say. Police actually appeal on TV, and they announce that, Raoul Moat is a wanted man. We believe he's traveling in this. We believe he's wearing this. So it was at this point where it becomes very, very much public knowledge.
So you think this man's going to be on the run, and you think he's going to potentially want to be laying low, potentially keeping out of the spotlight. That's not what he does. Because at midnight on that day, he has a phone call. He calls 999, dials the police, and this is what he says.
Hello there, this is the gunman from Birtley last night. My name is Raoul Moat. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done, right? Now, my girlfriend has been having an affair behind my back with one of your officers, this gentleman that I shot last night, the karate instructor.
Okay.
But the thing is, I've lost everything through you. So you wanted me to do myself in, and I was going to do it until I found out about him properly. You've had too much from me. You'll get your chance to this, right?
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
You do want me to kill yourself, but I'm going to give you a chance, because I am hunting for officers now.
Now, with hindsight and the context of what happens, that clip just gets more and more disturbing each time I listen to it. And the fact that 15 minutes after that phone call is made, Raoul Moat strikes again is absolutely horrific. PC David Rathban is sat at a roundabout not far from Newcastle city centre, and he's actually aware of the situation and has been told to look out for a white van, which is in line with the vehicle that Carl Ness had used to drive Raoul Moat over to Samantha Stobbart's. However, by this point, Raoul Moat has actually changed vehicle into a black Lexus, so he's able to approach the the police car without being detected. And once he gets there, Raoul Moat taps on the police car window with his shotgun, once again pointing it and shooting PC David Rathband at point blank range before fleeing the scene. Now, what Raoul doesn't know is that PC David Rathband has actually miraculously survived the attack, and he's able to call for help on his radio. Once help arrives, he's immediately rushed to the hospital, and he does actually survive the attack. However, it comes with a lot of complications to his health thereon after, and we're going to get into that towards the end of the video, so we will come back onto that. But Raoul Moat's immediate action after this attack is to call the police once again and to ask them whether or not they're taking him seriously now.
So yeah, they are taking it very seriously, to be honest with you. This is where they send over 160 police officers, and they were armed police officers, to that local area. Now, bear in mind that this is more than the armed police officers in Newcastle. They're coming up from Yorkshire, I think it was, and also from London as well. There was a huge amount of armed response. In fact, I think it was about 10% of the England and Wales entire armed police force. So they were taking this very, very seriously indeed.
Family, friends, ex-partners and others are immediately put into witness protection. Newspapers are running with stories from almost front to back, and the residents of Newcastle and the surrounding areas are of course terrified. Police receive a letter from Raoul Moat in which he states, "The public need not fear me, but the police should, because I won't stop until I'm dead." Samantha Stobbart even makes an appeal from her hospital bed where she pleads and begs with Raoul Moat to hand himself in. Now, on the 5th of July, the police make a briefing with some major updates, and this is that they believe that Raoul Moat is now driving a black Lexus. They believe that Raoul Moat has 2 hostages with him, and that they have confirmed that Raoul Moat robbed a local fish and chip shop the previous evening. Now, this leads to an influx of calls, and by the 6th of July, the black Lexus is found. The 2 hostages are found walking along a road alone, but Moat is nowhere to be seen. The 2 men are Carl Ness, who we've already spoken about, and the second man was Karam A1, who was the owner and driver of the black Lexus. Both men said that they had been taken captive and did not know where Moat was, but being that the police now had the vehicle and the other 2 men, they knew that they were not far from Raoul Moat, who they believed to be hiding in the vast woodland area of Rothbury. They actually find evidence to support this, including tents, including the aftermath of what would be described as a campfire, and some more handwritten letters from Raoul Moat.
And it wasn't just that. So on the 9th of July, at 7:25 p.m, a member of the public was actually on a walk down by a river in that sort of local area. And basically they said, you know, quite frankly, they've seen this guy. He's not a very difficult guy to find, to be fair, at this point. And so they basically reported that straight to the police, and that proved to be a very genuine sighting. And this is where the standoff begins. Basically, armed police immediately descend on the scene. They set up a cordon all around the local area, and they actually try and push the media and onlookers away because, quite frankly, they're not safe. And we actually see footage of that as well. And Moat was found with a sawn-off shotgun pointed directly at his neck. And this is where we start to see the start of a very, very tense negotiation, which went on for more than 6 hours, where armed police officers were basically trying to get Moat to surrender alive. Their key objective, or so we were told, was that they wanted to bring this guy to justice. They didn't want to kill him. They wanted to actually arrest him and make sure that he served a life sentence for what he had done. But there were various things that happened in this case that were very, very weird, to sort of just say, right? First of all, they send in his best friend, a guy called Tony Ladia. Was that the guy's name?
Yep.
He was brought to the scene, and again, they're using him to try and talk him down, to use a friendly face, someone that he would have known. But that didn't work. Then they tried to bring in his father, his estranged father, who he's not really
estranged,
known.
sorry. He's never met him. He's literally never met the guy
in his entire life. So what a weird weird circumstance. I mean, how the police thought that was necessarily a good idea, I'm not sure, because I mean, that's a traumatic moment in most people's lives, discovering that you have a father sort of saying who he was, and actually then trying to understand that, comprehend it in your mind, not be upset and annoyed. And that's the complete opposite of what you want to do.
Talking of controversial, I'll say something now, right, that will be controversial, but I don't think that anyone would have been eligible to be sent down and to have a chat with Raoul Moat, a man who, like, you still haven't even determined whether or not he had held hostages. So why would you send anyone down there? But rather than his father, I think you'd have had more chance with sending the next person down there who we're about to discuss.
Yep, Paul Gascoigne. I mean, let's just say it as it is. What a weird circumstance, this guy. Former footballer, former British hero, English hero, legend, would you say, in terms of, looking back on his football career.
Yeah.
He turns
and
up,
definitely in that part of the country
hugely so, Geordie. And this is the thing, he turns up in a dressing gown, he's got some beer, he's got some chicken, he's got a fishing rod, and he turns up and he
Tiger
thinks,
bread.
There you go.
It's got tiger bread.
Tiger bread as well.
It's very important.
Very important. Don't never forget the tiger bread.
So do you know the story to this? Because
yes,
I was about to say since Paul Gascoigne's got sober, but obviously there's different spells when he's been sober and not been sober and whatnot. And in an interview I saw of him where he was sober, he was looking really well. He spoke about the incident, and obviously showed a lot of remorse about it, and showed that he was feeling really bad about it. And he admitted that night that he was really, really drunk and had also taken substances, and that he saw this man's face on the news and had mistaken him basically for someone that he was friends with, for one of his friends, and that's why he was calling him Moti and stuff like that. He did actually say in this interview that I saw of him, where, as I say, he was looking well, he was sober, that he actually did know Raoul Moat, but not like he thought he did on the night.
I think he
just
had
known
he
him.
seen him. I heard that he saw him on the doors.
Yeah,
saw him as the bouncer.
You would do. And look, if you're...
He knew a nightclub, Paul Gascoigne, didn't he?
There you go.
He would have
And
frequented.
If you're Gazza and you're going out in Newcastle, you don't wait in queues to go in clubs. Do you know what I mean? Someone makes the bouncer aware, Gazza's there, and the bouncer brings you to the front of the queue, lets you in and whatever. So there is every chance that Paul Gascoigne would have passed or crossed paths, I should say, with Raoul Moat, but it definitely wasn't a friend of his. And this was one of the things that I think, and we'll get onto this, contributed to making the situation so bizarre that there was a slight level of support for Raoul Moat, because such a popular figure had actually turned up to support him in that moment.
Basically, what we've learned is none of these things were going well. And in fact, they might have agitated the situation and made it even worse than it was previously. What police said at the time, was that he was effectively immune to all of their requests. He wasn't able to calm down emotionally, and things were just getting worse and worse. In fact, witnesses actually heard him say that nobody cares about me and I'm not going back to prison. And you could see basically this was escalating and escalating. Police said again to him that Chris Brown wasn't a police officer. And at this point, he'd asked basically to see Samantha. So again, like, they're trying to calm him down. But I think looking back, the police would have definitely wanted to operate this in a very, very different way. And speaking of that, another thing that they did, which again, I find a crazy element of this story, as the conversations carried on going, they started using something that had never been used before out in the wild, and something that wasn't allowed to be used. In fact, the Home Office, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, after this said that it wasn't allowed. They used long-range tasers. So effectively, the way it works is it's effectively like a shot that goes into you and is meant to work as a taser would do. The thing about this, mate, is that the tasers didn't work.
Well, they were experimental.
Yes.
And they hadn't come out of the experimental phase, the tasers, right? So firstly, the first thing I would say is this. Tasering's not always the best way for these things. I haven't been tasered, but I've been there when someone's been tasered. And the person in question that got tasered was nowhere near the size of Raoul Moat's. Do you know what the taser did?
Come.
Did nothing.
Really?
Didn't put him over, didn't do it.
Because
Didn't do anything. Froze him up. A lot of people don't get taken down by tasers. In fact, it's about 50% of people that get hit with a taser actually are reprimanded or taken down or whatever. A lot of people will get hit with the taser, obviously feel it, but be able to walk off, to run away, things like that. And that's why tasers aren't actually the most effective for a crime of this severity, in my opinion.
So the tasers go in, they don't affect him. Again, we don't see him sort of collapse to the floor, as you sort of say. But what we do hear very soon after that is a gunshot, a single gunshot, right? And again, you know, as onlookers, we don't know whether this is fired from the police, whether this is, you know, Moat basically going after the police, firing a shot and then potentially retaliating. The thing we do find out is that this was a single gunshot and that Raoul Moat had ended his own life.
Yes, that is something that we'll probably debate a little bit here. But yes, it was a single gunshot wound to the head of Raoul Moat, immediately taken to hospital, but pronounced death upon his arrival at the hospital. But I think now it's probably a good time to talk about the inquest around the death of Raoul Moat and whether or not it was a suicide or whether there was some degree of foul play here. And the reason I use the word foul play is not because of the circumstance or what happened to Raoul Moat himself, but because of these tasers. Protect Systems was the company's name, and these tasers were never supposed to have been used and weren't actually legally supplied to the police. And in the aftermath of this case, Peter Boatman, a former police officer and director of Protect Systems, was actually found dead due to an apparent suicide. Now, I'm not implying that this was the direct motivation for this, if it was, but a colleague of Boatman's was quoted as saying that he was a very proud man who felt ashamed by the incident.
So I've often researched this case and I've been very unsure of the cause of death. There's something that doesn't feel quite right in that there was this experimental taser shooting, I would say, right? And a lot of people have said that if he did have any reaction or any convulsions, that could have effectively, bearing in mind his finger was on the trigger of a sawn-off shotgun, that could have effectively made him shoot himself. That could have been the direct cause of the shooting.
The word you're using is could. It's not could, mate. It would. It would do that.
But I've seen people debate the timelines of this. I've seen people debate whether it was exactly at the moment in which the taser incident happened or whether it might have been soon thereafter. Like, I've seen people debate this. So again, it's a bit murky, isn't it? How do you see it in terms of the timeline? You see the tasers go in, there's a reaction, and then there's a gunshot.
Raoul Moat was shot on 2 occasions by these tasers, right? And again, just to go back to Peter Boatman, look, we've all done stuff we regret and whatnot, but ultimately what he did came from a place of wanting to help the public and wanting to help the police. It was the wrong call. It was the wrong call, but it did come from a place of wanting to help and wanting to get this man off of the streets. Now, the problem is, when they first tasered Raoul Moat, he didn't have the gun to his head. He didn't have the gun to his head when they tasered him that first time. Now, when they tasered him that first time, you would imagine that they would have realised by this point, okay, the taser that I'm using is ineffective in being able to subdue the person here. It's ineffective in being able to detain the person, but it is having an effect on them because Raoul Moat's screams and that were visible from or were audible from the first taser shots. Now, the second taser shots, in my opinion, came at a time when Raoul Moat had the barrel of the gun to his neck. Obviously, at the time, this is what we saw in some of the footage that was being captured, multiple reports of residents and whatnot. And I am of the opinion that if I was the acting police officer, and I'm not a police officer, I don't know the course of action, and this is why we always give a disclaimer, just saying that we're just like friends in a pub talking about this sort of thing. I'm of the opinion that if I'm about to fire a taser at someone and they've got a gun to their neck, I understand that a consequence of that may be that your body is going to seize up, and therefore you may pull on that trigger without realizing that you were actually going to do it.
So you think it might have been more accidental as opposed to Raoul Moat actually taking his own life in that moment?
In 2011, the police were cleared of any wrongdoing involving the tasers, and obviously it was deemed as a side. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is that I don't have enough information to be able to go, case solved, Raoul Moat shot himself and it wasn't a direct result of the tasers. So I suppose in a long-winded way, I don't know. But I don't think it's that straightforward. No, and if I had to lean one way, I'd say the tasers did have an effect on Raoul Moat pulling that trigger.
Do you know what I keep thinking about this case? Is that the other potential ending of what could have happened is they would have had to shoot him eventually. They would have had to use conventional firearms, and they would have had to. I don't know what the training of a police officer in that period of time is. I mean, most times in the UK, you never shoot to kill. You always shoot to incapacitate. So I feel like that was the next step. And I don't want to belittle this, but potentially the same outcome could have happened, irregardless of the situation, is what one might argue for the police in that situation. Definitely, because you're not 100% sure that the taser is going to send your body into shock and that you're going to stiffen. So I completely understand that. And like anything, you don't shoot to kill, but from 20 yards away, or as far as they were, you don't know whether you're going to hit exactly your target or whether you could hit an artery and you could bleed out. So I'm not blaming the police for this. I'm just saying that the official ruling of a suicide isn't something that I can wholeheartedly say I believe, but that's not me blaming the police for this. And that's at the same time me understanding that, like you say, that was the way that things were going to go. This is a really hard situation. I think I suppose I try and give credit to the police in these situations because they rock up in a very tense situation of someone that has gunned down other police officers. So you're heightened already from that moment. You're worried about your own personal safety. And I can imagine that standoff being very, very tense indeed. I mean, arguably, would Raoul have wanted to bring a few police officers down with him if that was his intention? Possibly so.
100%.
And so it's a serious situation that could have ended and escalated in a way. The standoff ended in probably the only way it could have ended, because I don't think Raoul Moat would have willingly, even if the hostage negotiation had gone seemingly well, I don't know if it would have ended in a happy ending potentially.
Now, speaking of hostages, there was a lot of debate, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
In terms of the two men that were picked up walking along the side of the road, and they actually both wrote letters to their families. Now, Carl Ness's letter that he wrote to his family was that he had been taken hostage by Raoul Moat. However, the other letter is really, really intriguing, isn't it?
It really is. So this was Awad's letter. Basically, he writes to his sister. There's a line in the letter that basically says, burn this letter. So that's usually quite a good reason to suggest that he might not be, the best person to trust. But yeah, effectively, he says that I'm going to say that I'm a hostage for everyone else, but really I'm safer than safe. And oh, by the way, if you do tell anyone about this, I probably will end up getting shot. So he kind of gave away the game there, didn't he?
Do you believe they were hostages or not?
They weren't hostages at all.
No.
Let's be honest. It was a smokescreen. And maybe Raoul Moat had concocted this idea in his head. Maybe this was their get out of jail free card, that they were hostages and they were forced to do this. There's no evidence to say they were forced to do it at all.
I think there's like middle ground sometimes in between the lines of like, sometimes you can commit a crime by just not being brave enough, to stop it. And that's by law in the UK, by the way. Like, you can commit a crime by not stopping a crime in some circumstances, because then you become a assailant, is it? Or someone that's helped out, accomplice to the crime. And obviously, when you look at the fact that these guys, 2-on-1, for one, spending a couple of days with him, so there would have been times when he was asleep and stuff like that. Yeah, I would go along with your theory if they weren't really hostages. I think they would have had ample opportunity to get away from the situation.
Let me just give you some rationale why I do believe that. Effectively, Ness beforehand was doing all of the surveillance. So he was actually actively watching Samantha and premeditatedly, while he might not have known what he would have done, he's known that he's following someone and potentially giving some information of a man that would want to potentially do harm to her. So again, I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. Ness is driving around Moat in a stolen transit van. Again, might not have known exactly where he's going, but it's a significant period of time that he's doing it. Again, A1 actually drove the black Lexus. There's so many things that I could keep going through here where they're, again, just constantly accomplices. There were moments they could have left and they didn't do that. Now, there is a controversial element to their convictions because effectively what happens is they get to Newcastle Magistrates Court. It's on the 8th of July 2010, and they are charged with conspiracy to commit murder and possession of a firearm with intent. So very serious charges that they're doing, especially for what they would argue they were hostages or perhaps potentially, if they're implicit, accomplices. Right? So rather than being, the person that pulls the trigger, they would see themselves as being connections to the crime, right? They were both found guilty, and they were both sentenced to life imprisonment. So much so they actually got concurrent life sentences for the victims that had been involved. I think Cole Ness actually got 3 life sentences, and Karamewan actually got 2 concurrent life sentences.
One of the reasons why this was slightly controversial is, to my memory, and there will probably be people that can remind me of cases in the comments section, but to my memory, this is one of the only times really that someone has been convicted of these sort of charges without, as far as police know, ever even touching the murder weapon, without, in some circumstances, without being at the murder scene. So it was I don't know how controversial is the word.
It was controversial.
It's debatable.
No, it was controversial because there were other people that had committed crimes, and we've covered them on this channel, that have got far lesser sentences than these 2 guys, which, as you say, did not pull the trigger. Yeah, they were there to aid and abet an offender as opposed to actually committing the crime. So I think there were quite a lot of people that were questioning it. Personally, I think they deserve the sentences. Yep. They were there helping him. As I've said, there are various ways that they helped him. And I think they knew their crimes. I think the letters, unfortunately, the letter that we saw gave it away. Now,
me and you are both big true crime fans, right? Morbid curiosity is something that, I'm proud to admit, or happy to admit, I should say, that I do have. Like, I am very, very intrigued by these things. Listen, it's some people's cup of tea. It's not some people's cup of tea, but if you were everyone's cup of tea, you'd be a mug. What I'm saying here is this, right? There was fascination and sympathy.
And admiration, I think,
admiration for Raoul Moat than I have ever known in my life. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context, right? I was 15 years old when this situation happened. Still young, still pretty impressionable, things like that. And I think at that age, you're not, as sympathetic as you get, and you grow and you gain new members of your family, you lose members of your family, and you go through life and you experience things. But at the time, it was almost like entertainment at the time. It was like, wow, this fucking mad thing's happening. And
you got to remember, we're watching, I'm sure you watch these shows as well. Like, you're watching Cops from America. You're watching, like, what was Traffic Cops in the UK.
Great,
we were watching that and enjoying those TV shows because we wanted to see the car chases. We wanted to see what was going on. And this was real life. And I don't think you can downplay this. The media frenzy around this case was huge. Like Sky News was going 24/7 on this. Like, we were able to watch it. This was in the era where Sky was a thing. Probably had it at home. You were able to watch it, 24/7. And there was this sort of like entertainment element of this case, even though you were terrified about it. And I remember I was, quite old this time, teenager, as you say. Like, I wasn't afraid to leave my house, but there were kids out there that were told you can't leave the house. Like, this guy is there's a bad man about, and he could be causing people harm.
And the problem was with this case, I feel like there were obviously tensions at the time between the general public and the police force, and the way the narrative had been spun by certain sections of the media or online was that this was a man that had been getting harassed by the police, and eventually it had all got too much for him. And even though the public knew that he had shot 3 defenseless people and 3 innocent people, there was still, I'm not saying a majority, it was a vast minority, but there was a level of support for Raoul Moat.
Mate, there
people travelled to his funeral and things like that.
Did you see the Facebook page? Do you remember hearing about the Facebook page at the time?
Yeah,
There was a RIP Raoul Moat, you legends. And it gained over 30,000 members before it was taken down.
That's mental.
Yeah.
30,000 members.
David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, actually had to publicly condemn this particular Facebook page.
Can I tell you something, right? So I knew the Raoul Moat case, like, you know, I felt like I knew it like the back of my hand, right? And therefore, obviously, I knew this was a very bad man. I knew that this was a man who ultimately, you know, either, not going to say deserved what he got, but definitely deserved to rot in jail for what he had done. But it was only upon research in the case that I found out just what an awful person Raoul Moat was. We've spoke about his childhood. We spoke about a traumatic upbringing. I've got family members that have had traumatic upbringings, mate. They haven't gone and killed anyone.
It's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
No, and this is the thing. Like, I think when we're watching it on live TV, this was a developing story. A person that we didn't know that well. A man that the media described as a strong, athletic man. A man that they might have, in a weird way, venerated. I think potentially unintentionally, but they used language that some people found alluring, some people found interesting. So yeah, I think the way that it was portrayed was inflammatory.
Do you think if the general public had have known more about Raoul Moat's background, about his violence towards, you know, animal cruelty, violence towards women, the relationships that he'd been in the past? I mean, the public knew that he had shot his ex-partner and her innocent new partner. But do you think if they'd had more of a hindsight into his history and into his background, there'd have been that support for him?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, we've divulged the lessons of this case. We've divulged the details of what exactly he did. I think if many people knew half of that, a third of that, they would have been a very different portrayal of him. And again, let's get this right. There were people supporting him, but there were lots of people condemning him. And again, there were lots of people supporting the police at the time, much more so, the majority of people. So yeah, if only they did have the full picture.
Yeah. And you speak about the police there. I do want to end this by talking about PC David Rathband. He was obviously shot in the face by Raoul Moat, and he was blinded as a result of that. Now, it was miraculous that after being shot in the face, he survived, but his survival and his life didn't go, you know, down a happy path after this. What PC David Rathband was, apart from just, you know, being an absolute legend, was someone who wanted to help others before he could help himself. And that is why, although he was struggling, he'd obviously been unable to continue his job as a policeman due to going blind. There was a breakdown in his marriage and he ended up getting divorced as a result of this. But at the same time as this, he was raising awareness, he was doing charity work, and he was doing such good things with his charity work that they actually wanted him to hold, was it the opening ceremonial? What's it called? Was it the torch?
Yeah, I think so.
It was the torch for the London 2012 Olympics. He was supposed to actually be doing that. Tragically, just before that happened, PC David Rathband actually took his own life as a result of just not being able to come to terms with how different his life was, how it had fallen apart in, you know, in his mind. And it just goes to show that with these incidents and with these cases, they can continue to play out long after a sort of official end has come to it. Now, one thing that I do want to acknowledge was PC David Rathband's memory was kept alive at that ceremonial for the 2012 Olympics, because it was his daughter that actually carried out the torch. And do you know in what manner she did this?
Don't know this at all.
She did it blindfolded.
Wow.
To pay tribute.
That is so nice
to her old man.
Yeah.
So
that's a very fitting tribute.
Don't, because I get upset when I hear that story.
It is an emotional thing. And I think what we also should say here, because I think this is very poignant in various moments of British history, but also that the fact is that the police have a tough job, right?
Yeah.
And there are men and women out there up and down the country that go out, they don't get paid a lot of money, and they have to compete and do a very difficult job. And they often have to deal with very violent people, very difficult circumstances. And what I always think about in terms of this case in particular is it's just a job. It's much like, you know, going to sit in an office all day, or, you know, going to be a nurse or whatever, right? You go there, you try and do your job to your best of your ability, and you go home and want to see your family. And the police should never be subject to this sort of hate and this sort of fear that they were. And this is why there was such a significant manhunt, because it's just not right what happened. And I think what we wanted to convey is that we massively support the police and appreciate the work that they have to do on a daily basis.
Yes, and condolences, huge condolences to David Rathband, to the family of David Rathband, Samantha Stobbart, to the family of Samantha Stobbart, and very, very importantly, to Chris Brown as well, a man that had done nothing wrong. Ultimately had only really done good things for society, you know, teaching kids combat sports, things like that. That's giving back to the community. That's doing good things for society. This was a good man who did not deserve to die. So condolences to the family. It's been a bit of a tricky one to speak about, because this is a high profile case and it's a case that did divide a lot of the public, but we wanted to cover it either way. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and let us know what you want covered next. We have been taking so much inspiration from so many of your comments. A good 6 or 7 cases now that you guys have suggested to us have been covered on the channel, so please keep getting them in. We will get round to them. You might need to be patient. And also, if you would like to get the content that we are putting out up to 48 hours before it becomes available to the general public, then you can become a member by clicking the link in the description. It's a small monthly fee, and that will get you exclusive access to the content 48 hours before, as well as exclusive access to our weekly members only live streams. Thank you all for making it to the end of another video, and we will see you all in the next one.